Hey guys, today I have Nate from Nate's Adventures with me today. How's it going, Nate?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for coming on. So Nate has learned Spanish to a very high level as a second language speaker. I showed some videos of him speaking Spanish to a native speaker friend, and native speaker friend said he is like almost at native level.
¿Tus papás son mexicanos?
No,
¿No?
aprendí en la secundaria.
Órale.
So that's why I was definitely interested in talking to Nate when he reached out to me. And we also just did a video for his channel, so make sure to check that out as well. So Nate, on your channel, you have a lot of videos of yourself talking to like tutors.
Sure.
And that's some of your highest viewed videos. I noticed the ones that have a very high view count tend to have very attractive women in the video.
That's true.
So, but a lot of times when they ask you, how did you learn Spanish so well? You kind of give this nonchalant answer like, oh, just in high school.
Yeah,
I took it in high school. And I totally know where you're coming from because when Japanese people ask me where I learned Japanese, it's such a big story to go into. A lot of times I'll just be like, oh, I like anime, whatever. I read books. And so I imagine that there got to be a little bit more to your story than that. So
Yeah.
what is the story behind
Definitely.
it?
Okay, yeah. Well, now that we have a longer chat, yeah, I definitely go into that. But yeah, that is it's so true. Cause people are like, what in high school? I'm like, yes, but you're right. I mean, I don't have any Spanish speaking family. So that one's out. But I think for me, I did learn in high school. I learned the mechanics of the language and the concepts and the rules and everything. But I think what kind of set me apart from everyone else, and I don't mean to sound cocky when I say that, but the idea that like when I first started the first day of Spanish class, I remember vividly, after the class, I was like, wow, this is bizarre. The fact that like my whole life I've lived in California, there's Spanish speakers all around me, and I had always told myself, Spanish is hard, I'm not going to learn that, I'm not interested in that. And then after that class, like, whoa, this is so weird, like, I just make this sound and then this person will understand me. That's insane. And, having a lot of Latino friends, I was like, hey, one of my good friends, Luis, and another one of my friends, Aaron, and also Luis's brother, Jose, I was like, hey guys, so I just learned this in class today. Let me know if this makes sense. And, in my horrible accent, I said something like, buenos dias or something like that. And like, yeah, it's good morning. I was like, oh, so you understood me? Like, yeah. And so, throughout my 4-year high school career, it was really a matter of going into class, learning the rules, and I would actually pay attention because, like I said, I enjoyed it and I realized how cool it was. And then it was take it outside of class, particularly at lunch, honestly, it was 45 minutes of me just, picking the brains of my Spanish-speaking friends. And it was a blessing because they can speak English and Spanish natively, essentially. So then I was like, hey, I want to say this, or I would say something and be like, no, say it like this. And that's kind of really what took it to the next level, I would say.
Cool. So like, what was the kind of progression of, so this was freshman year in high school when you first started to take Spanish classes, and then your close friends group happened to be Spanish speakers. And so did you guys start to speak in Spanish just fully part of the time? Or did you also start to kind of consume Spanish media when you were like at home? Like
Sure.
What did the progression kind of look like?
Yeah, actually, so it's interesting. I look back on high school and I actually did not spend a lot of time like watching TV series or watching movies. Like I absolutely loved learning Spanish, but I would say the majority was just speaking with my friends and listening through that method and getting better through speaking. And I would also listen to some music. I really started to listen to music every single day up until today, when I was probably a junior or senior. So it was kind of towards the tail end. But I will say that is when my accent and listening comprehension became way better.
So you think the music helped with that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I cannot recommend listening enough. I think, part of being able to have better accent, better listening comprehension is hearing your language all the time. That's why people are always saying, oh, you need to go live in that country and your language would be so good. I mean, that's not necessarily true because I got to a very advanced level without having, I lived in Spain for 3 months, but that was after my Spanish had already become to a pretty high level.
So when was that you went to Spain?
This was 1 year ago. That was 1 year ago.
Okay, so yeah, so for the whole like bulk, like large majority of your time learning Spanish, it was all in the U.S.
Right.
Which is something that we have in common, where the bulk of my time learning Japanese was also in the U.S.
Sure, and you know what? I will say though, being surrounded by predominantly Mexicans where I live in Southern California, of course we have people from Colombia, Venezuela, and all these other South American countries. But, to this day, people, mainly when I speak to them in Spanish, if they're a Spanish speaker, they think I'm Mexican. Because I've grown up hearing that particular kind of Spanish. So I definitely attribute that to my Spanish level as well. But yeah, listening is crucial.
Yeah, that is really interesting to think that potentially, because I talk about on my channel about there's active listening and then passive listening. And passive listening is when you kind of leave it on while you do other things. Maybe sometimes you pay attention, sometimes you don't. And I talk about how that's not as beneficial as active listening, but it still is worth something. So it's interesting to think maybe you did have a lot of passive listening throughout your life.
Sure. Even
though you weren't conscious that you were engaging in language learning at all.
Yeah, you're right. There's actually kind of a weird story. It's really weird, to tell you the truth. Like in a cool way, is that growing up, my dad, he loves Latin jazz. My dad does not speak Spanish, but he loves like Poncho Sanchez and all these people, like the Buena Vista Social Club, like all this like Latin, like really like fantastic music. And growing up, I remember kind of dancing around, like listening to it, being a little kid. And it's funny because just recently I was driving my car and I had placed this CD in my car we have called Driving Tunes, which we used to listen to, in his truck a long time ago. I was a little kid. And now it's weird listening to these certain CDs with this kind of music and like, oh, I know what they're saying now. And like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, who knows? Maybe even that was helping you out some way, helping you build up the latent potential.
Yeah, definitely.
That later you kind of activated in some way.
Definitely.
And so for those high school years, how were you thinking about your own Spanish? Were you like, I want to get really fluent, like I want to get to this level, or were you kind of just like taking it one step at a time and knowing that you wanted to get better than you currently are, but you didn't have any endpoint in mind?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I knew I wanted to get better, but it's not like my goal was to become this like amazing Spanish speaker or whatever. I think honestly, this is such a cliche or like silly, cheesy thing to say, but like really like loving the language that you're learning is so important to your success. It's like I equate it to like, you're not going to do something that you hate. It's not like you're going to do that often and frequently. It's like, for me, it's not like I was like, man, I'm going to take this so seriously. I am going to become the best Spanish speaker in the world. It was like, no, I was like, I love this. It's so cool that like now I can just meet any Latino and be like, what's up? Let's talk in Spanish. And like, I one of my favorite quotes about language learning is by Nelson Mandela that says, if you speak to a man in his second language, you're speaking to his mind. But if you speak to him in his first language, you're speaking to his heart. It's a little cheesy, so true. People are way different when you can speak to them in a native language. So I realized that early on. And for me, I just loved it. So I just, step by step, better and better. And now I'm still learning, honestly. I still have the mindset. I'm still getting better. Like, I'm still learning.
That's cool. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Ultimately, well, I could say that there's two main reasons you might learn a language. One is out of pure necessity, right? If you had to immigrate to a country due to some other circumstance and now you're stuck there, you probably want to learn the language. But outside of that, and probably if you're an English speaker, because if you speak English, you don't really have to learn any language. The only other reason to do it is out of love.
Sure.
And actually, you kind of just mentioned this kind of caricature of someone who's just like, yeah, I just want to be the best person at Spanish or whatever.
Sure.
That's kind of what I was like with Japanese. And I can recognize that now as that was kind of a mistake to have that mindset. And because of that, at certain points, I almost developed an antagonistic relationship with Japanese because I was not doing it out of pure love for Japanese. I had a lot of love for Japanese, but there was also this kind of impure like expectation that Japanese was going to give me something and that Japanese owed me something. And that got in the way of me just appreciating Japanese for what it was. And now that's something that I'm starting to be able to do more as I get a little more mature. I can let go of those other like ego-based kind of motives.
Definitely.
And so I think that that's so important. And that also just for motivation, right? If
absolutely.
you have this end point in mind, and that is what you're fixated on, then you're constantly going to be aware of how far away you are from that, and that's going to make your current self feel bad. And that's awful for motivation. So if you're always just looking only one step ahead, then, you know, it's always just going to be exciting instead of you feeling bad about yourself.
You're right. And you know, this applies even just outside of language learning. With whatever goal you have in your life, I mean, you think about it, I constantly have to remind myself, enjoy the process, because the reality is my Spanish got to the level that it is today, not overnight. It has taken, you know, the past 6-7 years now, but that sounds like a long time to be learning something, but like, it doesn't feel like it because I love the process. I enjoyed the process. It's not like I was like so dissatisfied that I couldn't say this word really well or this phrase, or I couldn't connect with people as well. You know, it's like, I always like to say, you know, it's a process, not an event. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. I think that's really important as well. And so now I'm just kind of getting in a little bit more technical. So I'm curious, like, we talked about your motivation at the time, but
sure.
What was the way that you were kind of thinking about getting better at Spanish at the time? Like, were you kind of aware of like, oh, I don't know how to say this, so I gotta confirm, or like, how conscious were you just of the process of getting better?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to get better. But like I said, I didn't have like a finite goal order. I just knew I wanted to get better. Something that I tell people a lot is you got to ask questions. For me, having, you know, basically, I don't want to say being forced, because it's not like I was forced to take Spanish class, but, you know, being in that class for 45 minutes every day, because I knew I was like, oh, I'm going to learn this language. It's not like I want to learn it to this highly proficient level, but I knew I wanted to learn it. So, you know, I was constantly asking questions in class. Could you explain the preterite again? Yes, Nathan, it's blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I still don't understand that. Can you explain it again? Like, being kind of shameless in that idea that, like, if you don't understand something, you got to ask questions. And I would do it with my friends, too. I would try to say stuff and like, dude, that is so wrong. Say it like this. And I would say it again, and it would be wrong. No, but you got to say this. You know, like, okay. So, you know, you have to fail constantly, but that's part of the fun. Is like, oh, wait, okay, all right, and it's supposed to be this, and and that comes through trial and error. You know, through whether you're reading stuff or speaking with native speakers, whatever it may be.
Yeah, totally. And so that kind of on that note, I feel like at this point we should probably address what a lot of viewers will feel might be an elephant in the room, which is that the method that I talk about, how I recommend people to learn a language, is pretty different than how it sounds like you learn Spanish. But I totally think that this is reconcilable for a few reasons. First of all, I'm kind of talking about I'm talking about learning any language, but of course I learned Japanese and I've spent a lot of time studying Chinese. And so I kind of have an emphasis on coming from the perspective of learning a language that's very different from your native language, like totally foreign.
Sure.
And so obviously Spanish is a lot closer to English. Definitely. And so I think, like, in a way, you're starting off with an advantage. I don't like to think of it as it's easier, but that it's the gap between where you're starting and where you're going is not as huge.
Sure.
And so in a way, like the way that I recommend people to go about learning language is to first, before they are really just jumping out and having interactions with native speakers, to instead be still jumping into authentic language, but in the form of input and not output. So you're going to be engaging largely with media, like you're watching TV shows and reading books and building up a foundation through that. And it sounds like you didn't really do that, but I almost have this image in my head of like, let's say that there's kind of this cliff that you want to get to the top of, or maybe what we can imagine it's almost like a 10-foot cliff or something like that, not a like a 100-foot cliff or something. So we're at the bottom and we want to get to the top. And so in the case of Spanish, maybe it's like a 10-foot cliff. And so right at the beginning, if you like jump, you can get high enough where you can put your fingertips on the top of the cliff and then slowly lift yourself up. Whereas the Japanese, maybe it's like 20 feet high. And so no matter how high you jump, you can't even get your fingertips to the top of the cliff. And instead you have to start by building like some kind of like crate that you can stand on top of, or multiple crates you can stand on top of, so that then you can jump and then pull yourself up.
Sure.
And so in this metaphor, when you're actually talking to native speakers and engaging them and learning through real life interactions, that would be like you already have your fingers on the cliff, and now you're just pulling yourself up to kind of bridge the rest of the gap. So that's kind of one thing, is I think when you're learning a language that's similar to your native language, it's more viable to kind of jump right in right from the beginning.
Sure.
And another thing is that it sounds like you had this great benefit of having bilingual friends.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was almost like, I can imagine that you can speak Spanish to whatever degree you're able to speak Spanish, and then just default for English for the rest, which
you're right.
is like a really great kind of circumstance. Whereas, in Japanese people don't speak English most of the time. So if you just went to Japan, like that's what I kind of found when I was in Japan, was it was hard for me to make friends when I didn't have a strong Japanese level because they didn't speak English, I didn't speak Japanese, and there was just no way to communicate. I mean, we could communicate basic ideas very slowly, but that wasn't enough for a real friendship to form. So I kind of feel like there's that as well. But the other thing is that no matter, like, the fact that you got good at Spanish tells me that you must have gotten a ton of Spanish input. And maybe that input was from real life native speakers rather than a TV show or something. But it's like you had to get Spanish into your head, right? You didn't make up Spanish. You didn't deduce it from scratch. It's like just a little bit ago, you gave an example of something that in Spanish is just said differently than English. What was that?
Like I'm scared. You don't say I am scared. You say I have scared. Tengo miedo.
Yeah, there you go. So it's like you had to learn that by hearing a native speaker say it. Right? And so you clearly had to get it into your head. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to address that. Sorry to go on such kind of talking about why I think it's still like ultimately you still spent hundreds of probably thousands of hours interacting with Spanish.
Yeah, right? Of course. I mean, and like you said, I definitely did have that input. I think, at the time, it's not like I was aware of like language learning techniques, where now, for example, right now I'm learning Mandarin Chinese. To be honest, I've been pretty lazy, but I understand, okay, listening is so important to be constantly listening so you can get that down early. But, a lot of input, like I said, I'm from Southern California. We have a lot of Hispanic people here. So, my teachers were, native Spanish speakers. There was only one teacher I had that was not a native Spanish speaker, but they could also communicate in English. So, for 2 years of high school, my classes were only in Spanish. So the first 2 years were, first year, just English, basically. Second year, English, slight more Spanish. Third and fourth year, only Spanish. So, to be honest, I had already gotten to a pretty high level by my second year. But I would definitely say by the third and fourth year, I mean, constantly, 5 times a week for 45 minutes hearing only Spanish, that's really useful.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Yeah. So with that out of the way, just some other things that while I was watching your videos that I wanted to ask you about. So like I mentioned right at the beginning, you have these videos of you interacting with native speakers. And from my point of view, I can kind of see what you're doing because I do the exact same thing when I'm talking to Japanese native speakers. It's kind of like, I can tell you've done this many times. So you've kind of have worked out the exact, like you've kind of got it down to a T, like a science of like, how do I get the best reaction out of native speakers? How do I blow their minds the most? And I noticed like you'll start singing songs that they wouldn't expect you to know. You'll bust out popular tongue twisters that you've practiced so that you could, and all these things. And so I'm kind of curious, what did that process kind of look like? If you kind of getting this down to it's almost like you were preparing for YouTube.
Like, it just comes back to the love, man. I just loved it. So I just learned these things. It's not like I needed to learn tongue twisters or need to learn the music. I just loved it. So I was like, man, like, I love this. Sounds so good. All right, cool. Like, I'm going to learn it. I mean, like I said, it comes back to the genuine love. And in regards to those kinds of videos, it's so funny because sometimes I feel a bit silly having like a more like serious dialogue about like language learning, and then you go to my YouTube and you see me saying these silly things with these people online. But for me, my goal, honestly, like I've got my little tagline, love language, love people. I genuinely believe that. That's not some like thing I'm trying to like market or sell. It's like the genuine, like, I want to show people through my videos how cool it is to be able to speak another language. And you can see all through our interactions, like, wow, these people are way different now that they're speaking to him in Spanish. And this guy would never have been able to communicate with them if he had never learned Spanish. That's really what I'm trying to communicate, is like, yes, I want to educate people, but at first I want to entertain them, to be like, look how cool this is. I want to show them the love right there. So yeah, that's it. That just came from love, just loving it and learning, tongue twisters and songs and everything like that.
That's cool. And yeah, I think it's totally true what you said, where the language learning starts from getting excited about it, getting motivated, having that thought of like, whoa, look at this guy. Like, could I do that? And showing that, especially, I think it makes extra sense for Spanish, because for people like myself who live in the US, and you start paying attention, there's Spanish speakers all around us. I mean, it depends where you are, and I'm sure there's even more in California, but where I am in Oregon, like, my neighbors are Spanish speakers. When I'm on the train, the announcements are in English and then Spanish. Like, Spanish is everywhere if you actually pay attention. But I think, like, for myself, until pretty recently, I also was kind of just ignoring that Spanish from my environment because it was always there. I never paid attention to it. But once you kind of see someone like you who's really having a more enriched experience of living in the United States because they know Spanish, it makes you think, maybe I could do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
You start thinking about it.
That's my goal. Seriously, that is my goal. Like, it's amazing. Honestly, I remember just some of the comments I've received are so cool. You inspired me to learn Spanish. I'm from X country and now I want to learn Spanish. Like, all these things. It's not like, because for me, I realize people would rather watch a video of me surprising a teacher with Spanish than, hey, what's up, guys? This is the preterite tense. Today I'm going to teach you that. Like, that's important, but I want to show people the heart of, like, why you even learn a language in the first place, to be able to connect
and there's probably also already so much content that will teach you the nitty gritty out there.
Exactly.
That you might not necessarily be providing that much new value by doing that again.
Exactly. Yep. 100% agree.
Cool. Yeah. One other final thing that I wanted to ask you about was what your experience has been connecting with Spanish speakers, especially ones who maybe, well, I guess both bilingual English-Spanish speakers,
Sure.
but especially ones who, like, English is not their first language.
Sure.
Because, like, I know for me, just to kind of give a little more context, when I meet Japanese speakers who are bilingual in the sense of from childhood they're speaking both, so they're totally native level in both, we normally speak English just because even though my Japanese is good, my English is still better because I'm a native speaker, obviously.
Sure.
And so it's just more natural to speak English, although I'll throw in Japanese words and things. We'll both,
Sure.
But it'll be English as a base. Whereas, of course, when I'm speaking to a Japanese person who doesn't speak English natively, we almost always only speak in Japanese, because what I found is that when there's two different people who speak different native languages, it's very natural to default to the stronger language between the two.
Sure.
And it's very rare for a Japanese person who's learned English as a second language to be able to speak English better than my Japanese. And so it almost always ends up being like just Japanese. Japanese.
Sure.
And so I'm kind of curious, like, how that ends up playing out for.
Sure. I mean, with my friends who are Spanish speakers and English speakers natively, it just depends. It kind of just depends. We kind of go back and forth, which is cool. I'll never forget this. One of my good friends, one time we're chatting, and Spanish speakers in the States will do this thing with each other where, especially the younger people who speak English and Spanish, they'll be speaking in English and then they'll randomly switch to Spanish for like 5 seconds and then go back and then keep doing it. And I had always seen Spanish speakers who speak Spanish and English doing this thing where they'd be like, hey, how's it going? Y luego lo que podemos hacer is we can go to the blah. And then I'd be like, what? Like, what are you guys doing? And I remember one of my friends, good friends, she speaks to me in English, she switches to me in Spanish, and then switches back to English. And I was like, I made it. I've made it. But yeah, it just depends. With my Spanish speaking friends, it's kind of a mix. In terms of just native Spanish speakers who don't speak English at all or well, yeah, I mean, we'll always speak in Spanish. I think it's so, this sounds so silly, but it's true. It's like, I was recently, a few months ago, was speaking with this guy from Colombia, and we're chatting, and he's like, yeah, it's cool that you've learned Spanish because now you can speak with anyone who in Latin America or Spain. And I'm like, yeah, like, you're right, I can. And that's amazing to think, like, wow, the world has just opened up to where, like, I can be in, like, Argentina and I don't have to worry about, like, hey, can you help me get here? And, like, here, hold on, let me translate. Like, that's really cool. And it's really rewarding because Hispanic people, like Latino people, are the best. Like, they're so nice, so kind. Like, it's crazy to think like I would not have had so many amazing experiences in my life if I never learned Spanish. Like it really has changed my life so much.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm also curious how, after you get to know a Spanish speaker well, like someone who doesn't speak English, do you still find that there's kind of a cultural barrier? I imagine there's not really a language barrier, but I'll find with Japanese people, even when I overcome the language barrier, there'll still be a kind of cultural barrier where just because we grew up in such different environments and have different sets of cultural knowledge and cultural assumptions, that still there can be a little bit of a barrier where it's hard to get them to open up to me all the way. And it does happen, but it takes a little while to kind of crack a Japanese person open, you could say, in my experience.
Sure.
What about that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point. And I was just thinking in your situation in regards to Japanese culture to me seems a lot more, how to say, like, I don't want to say professional, but a lot more like serious, if you will.
Yeah,
and
I know what you mean. Like more formal. They're not as quick to tear down those barriers,
right?
Even
whereas,
amongst themselves.
Okay, yeah, because for example, in like Latino culture, and obviously it varies from country to country, but like Latino people in general are so open, so loving, very affectionate. So there's definitely been those situations where I feel like there's a slight cultural barrier. I feel it a lot less with people from Mexico because that's kind of the country that I've learned my Spanish from and have immersed myself most in, and is kind of my, I don't want to say favorite Hispanic country, but it's kind of like
the one you're the most intimate with.
Exactly. So anyways, yeah, I've definitely found that in terms of like connecting with people, I don't really have that problem because just who I am as a person. I'm very out there. I'm very loving and affectionate, and I don't really mind like putting myself out there because like I don't know. I'm not like I'm very extroverted. So for me, it's like I can have a pretty easy time connecting with native speakers. But yeah, sometimes definitely the cultural barrier of whatever it may be is definitely there.
Cool. Yeah, well, that's all the kind of questions that kind of came to my mind. Anything else you want to tell listeners out there?
Man, you guys got to learn another language, whether it's Japanese, Spanish, English, whatever you want. I think, that's my final word is just go learn another language. It's so fun, so rewarding. And like I said, it doesn't have to be this super serious thing. Just do it, love it, no need to take it super seriously and just have a great time. By doing that, you're going to progress actually a lot faster than you might think just because you're having a great time.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on, Nate. And everyone, make sure you go check out Nate's channel. If you like the kind of videos of people kind of kicking ass with their language ability and blowing the minds of native speakers, then Nate was the first time I saw that done with Spanish, and he does it really well. So
thank you so much. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for chatting with me. Seriously, I could go on and on about this stuff. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, thanks again. And thanks to all you guys who have watched, and catch you guys in the next one.